So hello everyone, welcome to Chats Over Coffee with my yoga teacher, with me, the yoga teacher, and...
me, the student, or the...
yeah. The non-yoga teacher?
The non-yoga teacher, yeah. Well, comedian.
What have you got going on this month in January?
Obviously I'm working. I'm in somewhere near Sheffield, Manchester, Newark, Nottingham, Leicester, Shrewsbury, various London things at the end of the month. Fern Brady's tour support starts at the end of January, so I'll be doing one of those in January and a few more in February.
Oh.
Friend of the show. So yeah, I'm just chugging around doing bits and bobs. What are you up to?
In January, well, I've got the first week off.
Boo.
Sorry. And then later in January, I'll have my regular yoga classes, 3 classes a week.
Is it not a big month usually? Because people are wanting to turn over a new leaf and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, in the past, January's always been like a really big, obviously with it being yoga and everything being health and fitness, there's a lot of like, new year, new me kind of stuff. But since COVID, I find it extremely unpredictable. So who knows? Maybe we'll get more people in classes in the new year, and maybe people will just meditate more and take more baths. I don't know. Depends on what kind of self-love they want to do.
Not hot baths in this energy crisis.
Yeah, hot showers. Hot quick showers.
Quick showers. 3-minute showers.
Something that might be interesting is I've decided to do a little bit of kind of giving back. So what I'm doing at the moment is holistic health coaching. And one of the things I decided I want to do is offer a pay-as-you-feel every quarter, so every season. So starting in spring, I'll have a kind of pay-as-you-feel option if someone wants to take it up. And I won't delve into that, so I just want to make it clear that you don't have to prove to me that you don't have money or something. And
I want to know though. I want some accounts. I want your bank account scanned, and I want to check this. You're taking advantage of my colleague.
But if you're interested in that as well, get in touch.
Okay, shall we let the show start then?
Yeah.
If Buddhism was real, right? You say it's real, don't you? Because it's not disproved by science. But I mean, let's see where I'm going with this, right? So if you had Buddhist Facebook, every time National Geographic posted loads of old pictures of wildlife, you'd get tagged as the animal that you were in a previous life all the time, which would be very irritating, wouldn't it? So you'd be looking at your phone, and there's some squirrel from 1953 or something that used to be. I don't know. So I did a new material night last night for the first time in ages. I did half an hour, and the best joke I did was about meditation.
Fantastic!
Yeah, so that's only according to the people that were there.
Yeah, of course.
You don't know unless you do it a few times. Mm-hmm. But the joke was about having a meditation teacher that had died. And just before I found out he died, I was thinking to myself, this is a long class. So I know. Well, it's better than I thought it'd be, because you don't know, you think you get better at knowing what's funny, but then you do it in front of people and then you don't really know, because the people are the boss. It's a true democracy. But then everything happened afterwards. So a woman comes up to me afterwards and says that. Oh yeah. So I don't know if I'm giving off this aura these days, right? But so she comes up to me and she says, "I can tell you're a meditator." I forget the phrasing she used, but that's not the first time that's happened in the last couple of months.
Oh.
The other time I didn't even mention it, but some woman that was she told me she was a yoga instructor actually.
Okay.
So I was like, oh, you should listen to my podcast. But then she started talking about stuff that you definitely don't talk about. She's microdosing magic mushrooms and stuff every day and things, and talking about energies and stuff. And I thought, well, you might enjoy it, but I'm not going to actually hammer this point. And she was talking about how she could detect a really strong energy from me and stuff, in a similar sort of vein. I sort of thought, either people are mad and are just projecting, or maybe I don't know, maybe I am just giving off this. It made me feel good anyway.
Super calm vibe.
Yeah, a Zen guru type guy, these.
Yeah.
That's something to aim for anyway. I don't know. It might be nonsense. There might be 99% of people think I'm some paranoid mess and don't say it to me. I just thought it was funny that that's just happened a couple of times recently.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, maybe it is. I don't know. It just makes you feel people can tell me I'm a good comedian all the time. I'm used to that. So it's quite nice to hear some different kind of praise. But
Yeah. A random question. Do you have a private pension?
No.
Just your state pension. No, I was just curious. Because obviously I've got the same kind of conundrum, pensions. I don't have a private pension at the moment, but it's kind of like...
You're supposed to do it when you're really, really young. If you do it in your 20s or...
The best time to do your private pension is yesterday.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well,
when you're 20 or 18 or something ridiculous. And the next best time is now.
I sort of don't want to retire though, really.
Yeah, but eventually one day you will have to slow down so that you're not...
I could do more writing work.
Like you're saying driving loads or something.
I might go on a retreat for... when I need to retire, I'll just go on a retreat then. And it'd be like a 20-year retreat. And I'll just stay there. I mean, what the overhead's there?
I assume you mean like not retreats. I assume you mean like finding an ashram or something like that. So usually a retreat is a place where you go on holiday and you just spend a few days and you're by the pool and you have yoga and you have like vegan food and a yoga teacher on hand.
Yeah, right. I thought it was like a Vipassana meditation retreat where you're in silence for 5 days.
Well, you can find those too, yeah.
And then I just eat gruel or something. I don't know what I don't know how it works. And then I leave and I'm at one with nature and stuff, and I can communicate with cockroaches or something. I don't know what I don't know how it works.
Okay, so your retirement plan is to go find a community that will feed you feed you and clothe you.
Well, no, I mean, I'll do the small amounts of manual labour that they need you to do. That's what Leonard Cohen did.
Yeah, karma yoga.
Leonard Cohen did it for 10 years. He did it like he lived up a mountain for 10 years and just did like manual labour every day in silence. And then he found out that his agent was stealing all his money, and he had to go on tour for like the last 5 years of his life. Which worked out for me because I got to see him live, which is great. But so as long as I trust whoever's looking after my stocks and shares ISA, I don't know.
Well, there are actually places where you can, the Manjushri Centre in Ulverston, you can go there. That's really lovely. That's gorgeous. I would always recommend that place. It's beautiful.
Did I tell you I did a gig there at the Laurel and Hardy Museum once?
I think so. I haven't been, because I've never been to Ulverston. I always just go to the Manjushri Centre when I'm there. I'm just like, hi, Ulverston, bye, Ulverston.
Right, so let's just get onto the...
Yeah, you mentioned in your email you wanted to talk about...
I listened to a 2-hour, 45-minute podcast with someone talking about AI and consciousness the other day, and I thought it was interesting. So I wouldn't know where to start with it, to be honest. I think consciousness is a very difficult word to define though anyway, isn't it? Yeah, I think.
I was thinking that as well, yeah.
So back in episode 2 or 3 or something, I mentioned there's a famous essay by Thomas Nagel, I think, called What Is It Like to Be a Bat, where it talks about the sensory, the way that a bat's sensory perception of the world is vastly different to ours. But it's because, the way it's, what's that called, echolocation and stuff like that. It would use to form... So the brain of a bat would be using different forms of information to create a perception of the world to the ones that we get. So I think there's something in that essay about consciousness is defined as being the experience of what it's like to be something, and that you're having that experience. For the bat, will be having a very different conscious experience of the world to us, because we're only interpreting the world in certain ways, aren't we? Because we can't see ultraviolet light, for example, and our brains filling in information for what we see and interpreting it differently, because we've got blind spots, obviously, so the brain fills that in. And when we see optical illusions, the ones where they have the 2 sticks and the circles around them, well, we don't see it how it actually is. The brain reinterprets it in such a way that we see the perspective when there is not perspective.
Yeah, I saw someone defining it as... So I read a bit about consciousness, because my first thought was like, well, how do you define it and stuff? And they were saying about like, awareness and your response to that, but then also like being aware that you are aware.
Right, yeah.
And I thought, that's a good way of putting it, being aware that you're aware, if that makes sense. But then also it was talking about how like you were just saying about how we're limited by how our senses perceive the world. And like, it was talking about plants. We perceive plants as something that are innate or unmoving. When they move, of course they move loads and they grow, but we just it's very hard for us to perceive that because we're not slow like plants. We're a lot faster. We live in like a different time to a plant. I just thought that was really interesting. And that kind of goes along with what you were saying about like bats as well. You know, they perceive the world through their senses. We perceive the world through our senses, but then we also perceive the world through our time. So how fast we live, how fast we perceive things to be happening and how slow, it also makes us perceive things differently.
Plants is interesting because that was mentioned a lot, because there's a specific pea-type plant which can either grow in a straight line or in a coil, depending on whether it touches, say it's growing up a fence or something, and it touches something it knows it can cling onto, it then starts growing in a coil.
Yeah.
So it, in some ways, is that making a conscious decision, because it is making the decision somehow. Because then you go down into like, well, that's an innate, so that is a biological sort of response to a situation, isn't it? But then we're no different to that, really, other than we have the awareness of what we're doing post what we're doing, more so than I assume a plant has, because I don't know if you're going to locate it in the brain or something, but I don't think plants have brains, do they?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of debate around the connectivity between the mycelia networks in old forests and in the ground.
Well, I've heard fungus underneath communicate through like root type things. Is that correct?
Yeah, the mycelia network is the network of fungus that live in the bottoms of forests as well as the trees. So it's both the fungus and the trees. The trees can use the fungus roots to communicate. But when you say communicate and you're talking about trees, we are genuinely talking about like sending nutrients, a little bit of signal sending in terms of chemical responses. But, you know, like you're saying, the awareness is a bit of a push. And it's certainly, I would say, not something that your average house plant is going to, I wouldn't say that your average house plant is like alert.
Right. But it's,
I mean, I've never say never. Love you.
Yeah. But you don't know, do you? 'Cause you're not,
just in case you think
you're not living the experience of a plant, are you? So there's
exactly.
So there's a human exceptionalism to it, isn't there? To think that possibly stems from. So it doesn't stem from, but that would explain why a biblical interpretation of it is almost like we're the conscious beings because we can talk and stuff, but everything else is for us to, you know, do what we want with. So we end up thinking that we're the enlightened conscious. But obviously we know animals, because a good metric, I suppose, is can an animal suffer? And you can see a dog suffer, and you can see many mammals suffer. Yeah. So presumably they are having a conscious experience of some level. Yeah. That, you know, it could not, maybe it's not as developed as us, or maybe it's a little bit pretentious to think that we're so much more, even though our brains are much more, the brains we have are much more complex, aren't they, than anyone else's. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think the thing that stops us from being, that helps us put ourselves up on that pedestal is knowing that we are at the top of the food chain. So that's not necessarily saying that we are the fastest or the best at something in specifics, but we are the top. We do not have anything hunting us. We never have to worry about that.
Yeah, but we have culture
alien.
And stuff. Like there's no culture of elephants or something, is there? Well, there is actually the grieving of elephants. They grieve and they.
Yeah, I know what you mean in terms of like we also have built, societies and stuff like that, which obviously help us.
Yeah,
with that
more
perception.
complex societies. I don't want the ants to get in touch and be like, we have societies as well. They're a bit more matriarchal than yours, but we do have them.
Yeah. But I have thought about this whole like plant thing, because I know you brought up pain, and there are plants that respond to damage, like when they in so quickly that we can see it. Like if you cut the leaf and the leaf shrinks, there are a few plants that actually like respond quickly to damage. But I think what scientists tend to say now is it's all chemical. It's very, very chemical based. So you cut that, the oxygen in the air reacts with the chemical that is now open to the air that wasn't there before because it had a barrier between it, but now it's open because it was damaged. And then the plant, as a response, as a evolutionary response, it is learned that if this reaction happens and it pulls back, then it won't die. It's less likely to die. So like over time, all of those kind of evolutionary steps have made it so that plant pulls back and has that chemical response. But is that the plant feeling pain and actually suffering like an animal would?
Yeah. Because to parrot the phrases that were used so apparently I think consciousness is discussed in science as being the hard problem of consciousness. Well, I just don't think that they have or at least the ways that they're looking at it now to explain it don't seem to be able to define or explain it in such a way that we've been able to define and explain other aspects of human.
It's like it's a fundamental property rather than something we can explain. Like one of the fundamental forces of physics or something. You know, your gravity or something like that, or your strong electromagnetic force and stuff. You don't necessarily try to explain the forces themselves. They just exist and they inert this response in the world, in the universe. I feel like consciousness is like that. It just, how do you explain something like that? It just is.
Well, it feels that way.
And you can explain the action that it has and what the effects of it are, but explaining it itself is like a bit mind-bending.
Because it's an experiential thing. I don't know how you map it on a graph or do any other scientific. You can't like do that with other creatures, can you? Because you can't have the bat experience or the plant experience and stuff. So you don't.
Yeah.
You know. So it's like when I was a kid and I used to sort of toy with the philosophical idea that I was the only living, conscious, alive thing in the world and everything else was a robot or a hologram. Theoretically, that could be true still because, like, I don't know. Like, I know I'm inside me and I'm real and that all works, but maybe everything else is some weird projection or something. Like, I have no idea. I assume not, probably, because you know I have an ego, but not that much. Yeah, it's. I think it's a hard thing, from the sounds of it, from the way that you would usually measure scientific things to be able to get an angle on it. But there's a school of thought I was hearing that they don't know whether it's something that is sort of innate in all kind of almost in all atoms as a form of psychic energy. So it's always kind of there because of the way that plants behave and stuff like that. You could theoretically, I don't know how you define it as well, I suppose, if you're looking at it like that. But I think a lot of people would probably have the assumption that it's something that that consciousness is something that you develop when you have a complex enough machinery and then suddenly the lights come on. You know what I mean? So I think we would say, oh, an ant doesn't have that because an ant's just reacting and doesn't really know. But we do because we're more complicated and we have understanding and self-reflection and stuff like that.
So surely that means then that you could potentially grow more conscious then.
Yeah, maybe.
Because potentially, like, you say, like, oh, we can't experience, like, life as a plant. And yeah, that's true. But we do have cameras that can capture, you know, infrared. And now we can see infrared, even though we can't see infrared. Or you know, ultraviolet or these other kind of, you know, wavelengths that our eyes can't actually perceive. But we can perceive them now because we have increased our intelligence enough to be able to create that so that we can see it. So is that a way of kind of expanding our consciousness?
Yeah, but it wasn't. I don't think it is. Because unless you actually embedded the infrared vision thing inside your brain, I don't think you would have the conscious experience where you'd be able to
biomechanics.
Yeah. So if the school of thought is that consciousness is to some degree something innate in all kind of like atoms and beings, that's one school of thought, and the other school of thought is the lights come on after a certain level of complexity, even if it's a very small animal complexity, possibly any animal. Yeah. What does it say about when they? I mean, would we be able, when we create computers that can pass the Turing test and have their level of complexity and algorithms that they're effectively, it's like being around a real person? Do the lights come on in the robot, or would we be treating them as if the lights had come on but they actually weren't? Like, is the robot having a conscious experience if we develop something with that complexity? I suppose the question I would try and find the answer to is it aware that it's aware? You could program it to think that, though. So it would say that. That's what I mean. So you would have to leave that off and you would have to allow it to develop that own awareness of awareness. Right. You know what I mean? Because obviously AIs have to be able to learn, and they wouldn't be artificial intelligence. They would just be artificial computers. If they're just computing, then they're just computers. If they want to say intelligence, then you have to make them learn. That's the key. They have to be able to learn and make their own decisions, not just compute and then action or result. It has to take it one step further. It has to take that action and that result and then do something with it, learn from it, remember it, and take action with that. It's complex, obviously, writing those kind of computer programs. You know, it's extremely difficult. So, like, I suppose, like you're saying, it's about when does that point come where they're, like, aware that they're aware and now they're conscious? Or could they never be because they don't have, I don't know, like... I don't know.
Because they just couldn't. Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of don't want to find out in some ways.
I don't feel like we'll ever get there, though. I also feel like,
famous last words, that. So when Skynet are listening to this in 30 years' time after we've all been killed off. But that's something always people say, they're going to take us over, as if, like, are we programming them like a virus or like a... Like,
but I feel like what's more likely to happen is that people will just use that kind of artificial intelligence in a bad way, in a corrupt way.
Yeah.
Like if you were to say like something extreme, like say if you use it in warfare, if you were to put a drone or an object that had artificial intelligence into a war zone and you were saying kill people that, kill these people, give them pictures, I don't know, say they can do it, say there's no error at all, and they can find those exact people and they meet those criteria, whatever criteria, they have a gun, they have this, whatever criteria you put on them.
You mean the Terminator, basically?
Yeah, basically. So, but every movie has done it. But like, I think even one of the Marvel movies did it. But if you could do that, then what's to say someone can't say, well, I want to take over and I'm going to get rid of all the people that don't agree with, I don't know, my Trumpism. And then all you have to do is go on social media to find the people who would be inclined to disagree. And then you send out your artificial intelligence and you don't even have to do it. You just say, look for them and then do something about it. I think that's more likely to happen than intelligence growing and then taking over like Orville style or something.
Because you can also do, I don't know much about 3D printing, but you can 3D print, like if you have the DNA code, you can print off viruses and stuff. So the H5N1 virus can just be printed off on someone's, like, or the smallpox virus or something. I mean, like, apparently it's actually not. I mean, obviously we can't do it. Your husband might be able to do it because he's techie, but
yeah,
as the layman couldn't do it. But apparently it's not that complicated to do it, and it's out there. The code to create the smallpox virus is apparently just readily available for someone to. I mean, we have a vaccine for that, but like still causes trouble, doesn't it? So it's weird. It's like technology is like, wow, we're addicted to it, really. That like, what can we do? And you can't undo an invention once it's been done, can you? That's the problem. There are good things about robots in a few years' time. We'll also be saying, but I don't know what we'll be saying about that. But, well, the negative consequences of having them around, we won't know for a while yet, will we? But there's anyway. I did write a joke about. I couldn't do this. This didn't work. When I did it recently, I was trying to write a joke about. They have like, not to get too blue or anything, but they have sex robots, don't they? Or now, don't they?
I've heard of that.
Yeah, so they're like.
I've seen it on TV. I won't say I know that they exist for certain, but
yeah. All right, don't protest too much. But so they're going to have them in the future, aren't they? So I thought an unintended negative consequence of that would be if I ever became famous, then people like to have the possibility of having sex with celebrities, don't they? So you wouldn't have to, would you now? Because they'd probably be catered for by sex robots that look like famous people.
Ew.
So you'd be like, but then how demoralising is that? If like I start checking Amazon to see how well I'm selling compared to all the others, and I find I'm like 129 or something, or like, what a horrible. I don't want to be famous. If that's. I mean, that's why I'm not going to try too hard at comedy. In case.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
But, right, I've had my fun. Now, talking about what I want. So you want to talk about Yoga Nidra, so let's do that.
Okay, yeah. So do you know what Yoga Nidra is?
I have done it, I think, but that doesn't necessarily...
With me or with someone else?
Well, I've done recordings that you've done of it.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean I know I've been to opera, but I don't really know what that is. So
yeah,
I haven't been to
You've
opera.
Done one,
I haven't been to opera.
Like...
I just couldn't think of something else that I could say that,
So basically, your Yoga Nidra is a practice that you guided through. Someone guides you through it, whether that's a recording or live or whatever. And basically, it's supposed to put you into like a sleep-like state with like awareness, trace awareness. So you're not like wide awake, but you're not asleep. You're not actually supposed to fall asleep. I mean, that's one of the problems of giving it a try, obviously, is you'll fall asleep. But you're supposed to not fall asleep completely. So you get that kind of like state between waking and sleeping. Kind of like some people would describe it similar to like the hypnosis state or a hypnagogic kind of state, where you're kind of just a little bit more lucid, but not super wide awake and thinking and things. It's a guide, so usually they go through things. It's supposed to be done in a monotone voice, so not everyone's going to follow that rule, obviously, but like potentially it's supposed to be done quite monotone.
I could be quite good at delivering that then.
There you go, you found your new calling. And it starts with a body scan usually, and then it goes into mental imaging. So if it's kind of like people's first one, I would always suggest, or I would expect usually that there's some explanation about what's going to happen, because it's a bit different. It's a bit quirky or a little bit weird. And you tend to do it lying down and propped up. So you're either lying on bolsters. If you're in like a yoga studio setting, you might be on bolsters with blankets and pillows and cushions and, you know, all sorts of things. If you're doing it on your own, then it's suggested that you kind of prop yourself up. If you lie flat on your back like you would in Shavasana, you'd be surprised you don't actually last that long. You know, once you get to about 20 minutes, you really start to feel like you want to get up. It's kind of uncomfortable. So I would always suggest that you lie slightly supported, it's not quite sat up, but like, you know, support yourself so you're not lying flat on your back, because you'd be surprised you do actually get quite uncomfortable kind of quickly. But the mental imaging part is quite interesting, because it's just like you just start saying things like a tree, a red rose, a mountain, a stream in the mountain, some stones, the beach, a full moon, and you're like, what the heck's going on? If you didn't know it was coming, it could make you think like, what the heck? But basically the idea is that, again, you're trying to bring yourself into that state between waking and sleeping. And theoretically, in terms of like why we do it, it's supposed to be rejuvenating and really relaxing, and it's supposed to be as good as sleeping. Now, I'm not going to ever tell people to not sleep. That's a bad idea. But the idea is that you could do like a 20-minute yoga nidra, and that's supposed to be the equivalent of going to sleep for an hour or something like that.
It's equivalent to a nap.
Well, it's supposed to be equivalent to like sleeping. So like a nap usually lasts like 10, 20 minutes, something like that. Whereas that's about how long your yoga nidra would be anyway, unless you went for a really long one. So really, it's supposed to be better than a nap.
Okay.
If you were to think
about
it that way.
So it's theoretically compensating for a whole night's sleeping, is it? Or
maybe not a whole night.
Because that seems incredibly efficient to be doing that, isn't it? I mean, you could.
I know, right?
You'd be like having 23-hour days, couldn't you?
I think the problem is with the yoga nidra is the risk of actually falling asleep. Especially if you feel quite safe, if you're doing it at home and you're comfortable and, you know, that kind of thing. There is that risk. So it's a great way to make you have some rest. And, you know, there's that kind of, I don't know what, like a sweetness of doing nothing, you know, just like, I just lay here, this is it. But like, it's quite nice sometimes to give yourself permission to not do anything. But it also means that if you've come from a place that is already quite depleted, so if you're exhausted, overworked, if you feel like really depleted mentally, physically, emotionally, then you're going to come to your yoga nidra, and it might be a great place to rest, but all these things are going to pop up. So this happens anytime we activate our parasympathetic nervous system. So when we start to rest, the things that nervous system kind of owns and governs will come to the surface. So if you've not got enough nutrition and you're missing things, then you might start to feel hungry, or you might just be hungry genuinely because you haven't eaten or something like that. If you haven't been sleeping very well, that's going to come straight up as soon as you lay down, and you're just going to want to fall asleep. You know, those kind of things are going to start to become more and more obvious to you as you try to rest. So sometimes if you're brand new to all of this kind of stuff like yoga and meditation, all of that, going straight in for a yoga nidra might feel really strange, because you might feel hungry, you might feel sleepy, you might actually fall asleep, the mental imaging might feel confusing rather than relaxing, and it just ends up feeling a bit like, have I really rested, or have I just confused myself? But if you go to like a yoga studio for it, then you'll probably always come away feeling rested, because the atmosphere of the studio is very relaxing. You know, the props, the people, the calming voice, maybe candles or incense. You know, there's an atmosphere around it that can usually help you feel relaxed, even if it's a bit quirky. But I do think that if you're struggling with, being depleted or being, feeling that kind of like, I've run out, that's it, got nothing left. which admittedly around, in America, Thanksgiving, Christmas, starting New Year's, all these things that we've been through, you get to the point where you're just like, that's it, I've got nothing left to give. So doing multiple yoga nidras regularly, like say a few times a week, even just finding something online might be good enough, can help you with that. So the first one might feel difficult, the second one might feel more relaxing, the third one you might feel like you're really gaining something, and it kind of like almost like you would when if you've missed meditation, if you haven't meditated for ages or something like that. So you
like list a load of stuff like the red rose and the traffic lights, whatever the hell.
I haven't actually got my yoga nidra script.
But can I just ask the logic of what specific things you're asking? I mean, you can't just like dick about, can you? And do
no. So usually it's related to nature, and it's trying to bring up potentially not feelings as in like emotional responses, but just images that we go through in our lives. I think one of them is even a doctor's office. So it's kind of like disconnecting emotional responses to things that we have come across in our lives that would normally bring about an emotional response, maybe.
So when you say a red rose, is that supposed to elicit a response in me?
By the time you get to the point of listing everything, I would say that any response should be like purely logical, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? You've got to the point where you're so relaxed and it's right at the end, and then you slowly bring people out. So usually I would say when you've got to that point, it is more along the lines of hypnosis style feelings, not responses. In fact, you go so fast that you shouldn't have a response really, because it goes quickly. One, bop, 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 bop. You list the things and you just say, picture and go, move on, picture and move on. In a way, it's a way of exercising the brain as well. Like it just gets the brain doing things in a state that it normally doesn't do things in.
Okay.
We're usually, as humans, we're usually off or on. We're either awake, alert, thinking, talking, perceiving the world, or we're asleep. The end. And I think this is like in between.
You're almost perhaps trying to implant some sort of REM state, do you mean? Kind of.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
So instead of the visual images of dreams, you just have this little visual images of things that are said and just move on.
Yeah.
When you started listing things, I started thinking of We Didn't Start the Fire or something. It's like...
The list is somewhat logical. It is worth mentioning that you're not supposed to practice yoga nidra if you have schizophrenia, or if you feel like that might be influencing you in your life from, like, if someone in your close family has it or something like that, because it can trigger problems, because schizophrenia is about that disconnection and multiple things. And then this could, because it's so strange, it's not recommended. So just that caveat is probably worth mentioning. I usually mention it if I ever lead one, but obviously if you're just going to go on YouTube or something, it'd be worth realizing that as well.
Can I just quickly give you a little, that song I just referenced, I think so. Yeah, the Billy Joel. Is it Billy Joel? Billy Joel. Yeah, We Didn't Start the Fire. I don't like the song actually, but what's very interesting about it, I heard once. This is not my point, by the way, but I think it is interesting. Okay. I think it's kind of relevant to the stuff we talk about in some ways. So that song is about the year he was born, and he lists a load of things that happened every year. So I think the first one's like, I can't remember what happens. I think Harry Truman's the first thing he says, because like Harry Truman was the president or became president that year or something. And then he bangs on like, England the Queen, Belgium's in the Congo, blah, blah, blah. And as the song progresses, it ends in about sometime in the 80s. And the number of things that he lists earlier on in the time frame is much more, like there are many, many more things that he lists early on in the song than later in the song, like per year. So for the first 20 years he's listing like 10 things a year, and he goes down to like 1 or 2 by the end of the song. And I don't know whether this is a deliberative thing or not, but someone pointed out that that is genuinely the way that we view things. As we age, we feel like less happens.
Yeah.
Even though we're currently living in a time where fucking loads is happening, but do you know what I mean? Like,
well, that is true. That is how the human brain works. Yeah.
So whether he's deliberately done that, or whether it's like a byproduct of just a natural thing, I thought that was very interesting that he lists far fewer things progressively as the song goes on than he does in his early life. Because I was listening to the person talk about it and saying that in those years where he only lists so many things, there was still loads going on. He just doesn't mention it so much. So that's interesting, isn't it?
That is interesting.
But it's still a shit song. Anyway.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So going back to the Yoga Nidra topic a little bit.
Should go back to it, really.
One of the things that I came across when I was kind of like looking into Yoga Nidra, like benefits and things like that, and one of the things was it was talking about reconnection. So basically the opposite of people being, disconnected from their bodies, from their energy, from their kind of, how they feel and all this kind of stuff, and kind of like making that disconnect. Do you think that you create that connection with meditation? Do you feel like you reconnect with all those kind of layers, if you will, of yourself and your body and your mind and your emotions and your energy levels and your soul or your spirit or your beliefs? Do you feel like you get that from your meditation?
I'm not sure I'd frame it exactly that way. I'd probably just explain it differently, because I don't really know when I tell people that I recommend doing it. I think people still are of the mind that it's kind of a relaxation thing more than it is what I would perceive it to be, would be a reframing of your relationship with thought. Relaxation is a byproduct of doing that and stuff. So I think it's just, I don't know, from what I'm being taught doing it, it's almost like treating thoughts in the same way that you would treat sounds, and just disconnecting from it, letting them sort of turn up but not identifying with them, doing that for 20 minutes a day, and then it kind of changes the way that you react to the rest of the day, in the same way that if you were practicing a sport for 20 minutes a day, you would more instinctively be able to do. If someone suddenly threw a ball at you in the middle of the day, you'd just be like, kick that back. That's how I'd say. So I kind of half forgot what you were asking there, like what I'm getting out of it.
Do you feel like it's reconnecting you to yourself, to your body, to like your energy level?
I don't think probably I would say that, but then maybe I just don't frame it that way. That's all. But then that's just what helps me and what.
Okay, so this is where I thought we would get to slightly. So basically, Yoga Nidra is different than meditation, because it should give you that connection. So it's not just watching the thoughts. It's not, or say just, but it's not the idea of sitting down and being in meditation. It is supposed to do one more than that. It is supposed to make that reconnection. And, people potentially have like, what you might consider like spiritual experiences or whatever, where they just feel more open or more loved, or they feel like a block has lifted, or I don't know, if you're that way inclined, you might say someone's visited you, or, or you just feel like something's just shifted and it's just like, that's it. It's not a problem anymore. Or I can let go, or whatever, or healing.
You microdose mushrooms for that, I think. That's.
I mean, they might help.
I think they probably do help, actually, with that.
But I mean, like, that is the kind of idea behind the Yoga Nidra, is it's supposed to be more. It's always supposed to be more than just, I say just, but meditation has its benefits and it is amazing, but it is different. It is supposed to be different than that.
Right.
And I think that's why you need a guide. And that's why it's supposed to be like a good guide. You're supposed to find someone that you feel comfortable with and stuff, because you'll never let go if you're with someone you feel uncomfortable with, Maybe people would feel that they are the same, your Nidra and your meditation, but I've kind of thought of them as being quite distinctly different, even though, like you were saying, to someone who hasn't thought about it very much or who hasn't really done a lot, might just throw them into the same ballpark as just being relaxing things. Oh, they just help you relax, when really they're byproducts of the actual effort, that you're trying to do. The purpose isn't to relax, but to do something else.
Yeah, it's better that the relaxation's a byproduct, because you're not. Otherwise, relaxation would just be a short-term thing. It's like going to a spa for a week and not fixing any of the underlying problems in your life. You're actually fixing the underlying problems and then being relaxed as a result of that, I think. Possibly more so.
Yeah, it's like being really stressed, going to a spa and then going straight back to your really stressful job.
Yeah,
it's
and then having more work because your emails are
piled
up for an extra week, isn't it? And stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you have any questions about Yoga Nidra?
Have you got a recording out there of a Yoga Nidra? Like if someone wanted to have one, like of you doing it?
Yeah. So if you get in touch by email or messenger or through my website, anything like that, then I can send you the link to a recording which is yoga and yoga nidra. The yoga nidra in that recording is about 25 minutes, but there's a bit of physical movement at the beginning as well, just to make sure we're comfortable and ready to sit still for 25 minutes, or lay still, I should say, in the yoga nidra. So if anyone is interested in that, I do have the recording, and that recording will stay available until the end of January.
2023.
2023, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have too much of a haughty ambition for this thing that it's still listened to in 10 years' time. But,
but just in case.
And I'm going to do a joke yoga nidra where I list all of the things in We Didn't Start the Fire at the end of the...
and see if anybody notices.
Yeah. Do you want to do a quick goodbye quickly?
Forget what we say when we say goodbye.
We'll just say thanks for listening. That'll do. I think that's a good... will that do?
Thank you for listening. Subscribe, like, follow us on all of the socials. If you're on
maybe
Instagram.
Don't bother with Twitter, it's rubbish now. But
not Twitter.
It's not a dig at Elon or anything, but I'm just like, it's just there's no point.
If you want to see me the most, I'm on Instagram. That's where I'm the most. So if you want the most content, that's where you should find me.
Not on TikTok yet.
No, not yet.
Right, see you next month then.